Hey, I have some issues, and I've made this clear. I have some issues about Liz Cheney. Yes, I love her rhetoric. I love listening to what she has been saying as the vice chair of the January 6th committee. And when the chairman, Representative Thompson, was out sick last week when they had their 8th and for the time being final hearing on the treason and the crimes committed by Christian fascists, Christian terrorists in this country, all clustered around Donald Trump. She was very articulate, very well spoken, as she is all the time. Liz Cheney would make a great English teacher, wouldn't she? But there is still something behind Liz Cheney's words that continues to cause me to get that kind of squeamish feeling that says, who am I listening to here? Who is this person? Liz Cheney. This is Dick Cheney's daughter. This is a woman who has done everything she possibly could for 3.9 years, you might say, to back, bolster, and support a Christian fascist takeover of this country in the persona of Donald Trump. I mean, Liz Cheney was right there for everything, including when the son of a bitch, Donald Trump, twice was impeached. Neither time did Liz Cheney vote to convict the bastard. Well, I'm sorry, she's not a senator. Neither time did she vote to impeach him. So, that has been hanging like, I don't know, like a carcass in a freezer. It's been hanging there. Liz Cheney's support of Donald Trump up to the last moment. And it really bothers me. And it's not just Liz Cheney. Now, she's in the position of being, the vice chair of this committee, but also a position of power and authority. She's been handling most of the questioning of these witnesses. Her closing statements, along with Benny Thompson's and Adam Kinzinger's sometime, her closing statements have been incredibly eloquent. So have Kinzinger's, incredibly eloquent. But there's a piece in a Salon that came out over the weekend by Lucian Truscott. And he starts out by saying this: you don't even have to look for the tell. It's right there. And the first thing they say after they so-called cooperate with the January 6th committee, and that is the Republican functionary witnesses sit there at the table looking smug and self-satisfied as they tell what they know about what Trump did and the puny shit they did to try to stop him. And when they're finished, they've been told they can smile and say, quote, but just look at his accomplishments, end quote. Just look at his accomplishments. The most recent bastard to do that, of course, was this Pottinger creep who testified at the last hearing. What's his first name? Pottinger was the national security advisor. He was deputy national security advisor to Trump. National security advisor. Jesus God. Anyway, last Thursday night, Pottinger was a perfect example of the con job that Lucian Truscott feels the Republicans on this committee, there are only two of them, are trying to run. He said that Pottinger was alluding to how he was so horrified by what he saw when he was finished with his off-site meeting with India's ambassador to the United States. I was so shocked by it all, about what Trump was saying and doing as the country was under siege, that I resigned. Remember, that was part of Pottinger's testimony. And then what does Pottinger say? Well, according to Truscott, it was a complete and utter crap load of smarmy bullshit about how dedicated he, Pottinger, is to national security and how proud he was that he served as Deputy National Security Advisor, and how Trump got tough with China and put together some treaty in the Middle East. It's not worth the paper it's written on when you get right down to it. But that's what Pottinger sat there and said. Pottinger, as Truscott points out, Pottinger was at his desk in the National Security Council office when Donald Trump was completely and utterly capitulating to Vladimir Putin at Helsinki. Remember that? That was when Trump refused to believe his own national security team. All 13 different national security agencies that said the Russians were definitely involved in influencing the 2016 election. And this rat bastard son of a bitch Trump stood there and told the world that he trusted Vladimir Putin more so than he trusted his own security agencies. Unfucking believable. And Trump was also sitting there in the executive office building working for John Bolton. I'm sorry, Pottinger was. You know, remember this guy, Deputy National Security Advisor. He was in the National Security Council office when Trump was completely and utterly capitulating to Putin at Helsinki. He was there in the executive office building when Trump was putting a gun to the head of Volodymyr Zelensky and telling Zelensky that he, Trump, wanted the favor of trashing the Biden family before Trump would release $400 million in military aid that the Ukrainians needed in their fight against the Russian incursion into their territory. Trump made it very clear to the Russians, didn't he, that the United States would do nothing and NATO would do nothing. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Vladimir. Attack another country. Commit the worst war crime that can be committed, as established by the United States at Nuremberg. Pottinger sat there on his hands when Trump fired Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch on bullshit grounds, knowing that she had done nothing to deserve it and that Trump was just positioning himself to exploit Ukraine in his effort to get reelected. Remember Marie Yovanovitch? Our ambassador to Ukraine. And she was telling the truth. She was a truth teller. And this fucking Trump, this orange vomit, cannot stand truth telling, nor can the fascist Christian terrorists who support him. Truscott goes on to say that it was Pottinger who knew full well that it was Trump's lapdog sucking up to Vladimir Putin and Trump's constant attacks on NATO and Trump's weakening of U.S. support for Ukraine that gave the Christian fascist dictator Vladimir Putin the idea that he could attack Ukraine and get away with it in the first place. That came from Trump. So the question, where was this great national security advisor hero, Pottinger, when Trump virtually disassembled the entire foreign service profession at the State Department by cutting its budget by more than 30%? Do you remember that? So much of this shit, it's difficult for you and I to remember unless we have somebody, in this case, like Lucian Truscott, to remember the things that Trump did. So we're supposed to thank Pottinger for his heroic decision to resign 14 days before Trump left office, after Pottinger helped facilitate every stupid-ass foreign affairs move that Trump made for 4 long years. And now Pottinger's a hero because he sits on his ass in front of the committee and talks about what he saw, while at the same time praising this son of a bitch, the orange vomit. And then Truscott says this. You may not agree with this, but I'll quote it directly. It's a con job, and the chief con artist running the whole game is Liz Cheney. She was right there at Trump's side for 3.9 years as he loaded up the Supreme Court with rights and ripped children from the arms of migrant mothers at the border, and then proceeded to lose the kids in a miasma of botched red tape and incompetence. She, Cheney, was all in for that crime against humanity. She was all in for the tax cut for millionaires and billionaires like her father, who used his political connections to make millions as chairman and CEO of Halliburton, and then turned around and loaded up Halliburton's coffers by being the chief architect behind the war in Iraq. Cheney was all in for Trump's absurd wall on the border. To this day, she's all in on every attack on women's rights that Trump enabled, including the overturn of Roe v. Wade. She was all in for Trump's absurd wall on the border, another boondoggle for Republican contractors that has done precisely nothing to stop migrants from crossing the border who are seeking to flee the oppression that exists in the regimes in Central and South America. And Liz Cheney, is to this day all in on every attack on women's rights that Trump enabled with his Supreme Court appointments, including the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. She was all in on Trump's loon-laden appointments to his cabinet, all in on his assaults on the environment and the regulatory powers of the EPA. She's still all in on the complete legacy of Donald Trump, with the sole exception of his attempted coup after he lost the election in 2020. Now, Lucian Truscott, who has what I just shared with you up at salon.com, puts into very easily understood terms something that has been eating away at me every time I watch this committee. And I see Liz Cheney's dead face. I mean, this woman knows how to put on a dead face, doesn't she? Christ, she looks like a corpse. I'm not saying that to be nasty or mean-spirited. I'm just saying it as a way of telling you what I see. I see a corpse face on Liz Cheney. No emotion. Nothing. Just that steady, monotonic series of questions. I don't like her. I have said a couple of times during the hearings, thank God for Liz Cheney. Yes, she is a very effective questioner. But as Truscott points out, where in the hell has this woman been for the 4 years of the Trump administration? I'll tell you where she's been, and you know this yourself. She has been enabling every rotten, unconstitutional, illegal, mean-spirited, vicious goddamn move that Trump made. Every single one. And she voted for him twice. And now we're to believe, and I'm one of the biggest fools of all to have started to believe this, that Liz Cheney really, truly, honestly is sitting up there defending human rights, constitutional rights, racial rights, women's rights with her questioning of these witnesses? One word, folks: bullshit. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com
and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.